Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Have you heard that the inaugural Landscape Photography World Awards is now open for entries? Early bird entry is available now at a discounted fee until September 30, 2022. Head to landscapephotographyworldawards.com to find out all the details and how to enter. There's some amazing prizes to be won, and I'll be publishing a book and a calendar with the top images at the end of the competition, so there's plenty to look forward to. Entries close on November 30, 2022, so there's plenty of time to get your entry sorted, but if you want to get into the early birds, do it now. I'd also like to thank the judges who have agreed to work with me and be a big part of the awards. Deb Clark, Victoria Hark, Kieran Stone and William Patino. I certainly couldn't make this competition a reality without their support. This week's guest is Vieri Bottazzini. He joins me to talk about his incredible fine art landscape photography. Vieri is an Italian fine art landscape photographer and educator with a personal style rooted in pure photographic craftsmanship. Passionate about the outdoors, Vieri believes in honouring the majestic power of our planet's beauty by creating his iconic images using unadulterated photography only. Through his unique black and white and subtly post-processed colour images, Vieri tells stories about the relationship between nature and mankind, exploring the concepts of time and of the surreal. His fine art work has been viewed millions of times on social media and featured on leading publications such as Medium Format Magazine, LE Mag, Elements, Landscape Photography Magazine and more. Vieri leads limited attendance workshops in places like Iceland, Scotland, England, the southwest of the USA, Italy, France and Spain, where he fully shares his knowledge and his art with his clients. Vieri's diverse and vast portfolio is the culmination of over a decade of passion, love and craftsmanship, of months spent on the road every year, of hundreds of kilometres of hikes and most of all, a lifetime's devotion to the art. Through his work and tutoring, Vieri aims to inspire others to embrace their inner artist and find their own path to self-expression. We discuss his fine art processes, what he sees as success in his photography, along with a whole lot more. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Vieri. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Hi, Grant. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well. And thank you very much for taking the time out to spend some time with me, helping my listeners learn a little bit more about you. So why don't we start with who you are and what you do and why we can then talk a little bit more about why you do what you do.
Right. So I'm Vieri. I'm an Italian fine art landscape photographer, and I've been doing this full-time as a professional for the last 7 years, I guess now. But I've been photographing all my life before that. So and landscape only since 2010. So I got pretty much 12 years of landscape photography under my belt now. Mm-hmm. Before that, I used to do people photography. I did about 5 years of semi-pro people photography, and I did a lot of street photography and so on, but which I still do, by the way, for fun, for my pleasure. Yep. But since 2010, I'm pretty much landscape only.
Okay. So I guess one of the questions that comes to mind in you saying that about the portrait, how much do you think the way that you developed your portrait skills has influenced the way that you work in the landscape?
That's a very interesting question. And funny you ask, because I always consider myself a portrait photographer portraying the landscape. And so I think the aspect that I most brought with me when I switched to landscape photography was that of try to understand the characters that I have in front of me. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you did any portrait photography, but if you do, or for those who do, understanding the person that you have in front of you is fundamental to me to give a good representation an interpretation of these people. And for me, it's the same way with the landscape. I'm approaching landscape in the same way. I'm trying to understand the characters that I have in front of me, and I'm using landscape to actually talk about human emotions, human feeling, and tell human stories, even though I never use human figures or people in my shots ever. But I think that's what I brought from portrait photography.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. So what is it that motivated you to shift away from the portraits? I mean, you say you still do them occasionally for fun, but what made you concentrate on landscape as opposed to doing the portraits?
Well, I live in Italy right now, but I used to live in Istanbul, Turkey. I lived there for 15 years. And Istanbul is a city with like 15 million people, maybe more. And so I was surrounded by people. I used to photograph people professionally, and street photography for fun and so on. And with my wife, at some point, we thought, okay, we have enough of people. We need to go somewhere when there is no people at all and recharge our batteries. Yep. So one July in 2010, we went to the Southwest USA, which is not very smart in retrospect, because it's like crazy hot.
Yep, very hot.
Yeah. But we went there and we survived, and I fell in love with the landscape, and I decided, this is what I want to do, really. I kind of found my calling in the deserts of the Southwest USA, so to speak. And after that, it took me about 5 years to prepare the transition to full-time landscape photography, because I didn't want to just jump in the dark. So I kind of prepared the professional side of it. And in 2010, I switched. In 2015, I switched full-time. But in 2010, I got the call. And maybe it was the heat. I was too hot.
What fried your brain to make you want to be a landscape photographer? Because a lot of people don't make money out of it. I guess that's one of the aspects. How did you mentioned you spent 5 years preparing? How did you go about that preparation?
I always thought, in my previous life, I was a musician. I was a classical music concert artist, but I also taught college and for about 15 years. So teaching has always been in my blood. I love teaching. So when I moved to photography, to landscape photography, I thought, well, if I could teach and do landscape photography, it would be great. And obviously the print sales and selling editorial and so on. But I wanted to focus on the educational aspect of it. And so what I did for the first 5 years, I traveled anytime I could to develop my portfolio. And I started to contact, obviously, magazines and private clients for print sales and so on. And I started in imagining the kind of workshop that I wanted to do, because as you know, there are a billion workshops out there, and I wanted mine to be different. And since I always taught one-on-one, because when you teach music, I was teaching flute, and you teach one-on-one or in small group settings. So I thought that it would be a good idea to do that for the photography as well, rather than having larger groups, so that I could concentrate more. And so I worked on designing a different workshop experience, and it went well. So my workshops now have groups of a maximum of 3 people, down to 101, and I love doing it, and it's working well. Obviously COVID put a little wrench in the wheels over there, but it went well in the COVID years as well, so I cannot complain. But yeah, I think that's that's why it took me 5 years, because I really wanted to financially being able to make it work. And sorry if I go long a little bit on this.
No, that's fine.
I think
We've got plenty of time.
There are so many people that I meet and they tell me, "Oh, I really want to do what you do," and it's like, yeah, I understand that. But yeah, the financial part, while it might sound trivial, is actually fundamental, because if you don't eat, you don't photograph.
That's right. Yep.
So for me, that part was a very serious thing for me to take care of. And I was a professor at university, so leaving that, it was a bit scary in a way. I wanted to be actually sure that this thing could work, before just saying, yeah, okay, let's do it, So, but I'm happy I took it slow and I went that way. So I might recommend everybody that wants to be a pro in photography to make a plan, have a business plan and a B plan and a C plan,
and a D plan.
Things don't work out, and a D plan, exactly. All right.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess talking about the artistry of photography, have you, you mentioned that you do fine art photography. How do you define fine art photography as opposed to, say, documentary photography?
That's the $1 million question. I think everybody is struggling to give an answer. My answer to that, not just in photography, in the history of art, what is art has been probably one of the most
that'll be argued about for millions of years if the human race survives that long.
For me, I think that what makes it fine art for me is the concept behind it. In fact, I prefer to actually use conceptual photographer, but it sounds a little pompous perhaps, and maybe people don't understand what the hell it means. So fine art is more accepted. But for me, the main thing is the concept. I'm very projectual and conceptual when I approach my work. Yes, of course, I do love the big sunrises and the big sunsets. I have nothing against that kind of photography, and I need to do it. And I love to do it for my workshop business and so on, for promotion, for editorial, for whatever. But my personal work is conceptual in nature, and it always starts with an idea. And the idea is not necessarily that I twist my mustache sitting at the table and then I found an idea and I go, eureka, and I go out photography. The idea oftentimes develop as I go. So I notice that I'm attracted to some subjects or some ways of rendering some certain subjects, and a portfolio is starting to grow up both in my mind and in my hard drive, so to speak. Yep. And then eventually, at some point, it sort of click with me, and I sort of think, okay, this is a nice body of work, and it means this, and now I got why I've been doing this for the last year or so.
Sure.
And then I developed that. Funny enough, the moment that the concept clarifies in my mind, it's also the moment when the project is nearly done. Because then the risk for me is that of trying to approach everything to make it work in that kind of concept. Does it make sense?
Yep.
So it's sort of like I photograph things and then they go together in a portfolio. And then when I think, oh, now I got this portfolio, then the risk is, all right, so whatever I see, I try to shoot in that kind of way. And then
you try to shoehorn it even if it might not fit. Yeah.
Exactly. It's sort of like fit the square thing in the round hole. And and then it's when I lose interest and I start developing something else. So for me, it's the concept behind and the intent, obviously, and also maybe this will sound a little controversial for some, but the technique is also important for me. So for me, I don't think the technical precision is detrimental for the artistic expression. I do think that technical precision or perfection should be a given. when we do the work that we do, we should be as technically perfect as we can. And that's the craft part of photography. And once you are over that, then your creativity can flow really freely. And I have nothing against people that don't care about that and they just shoot totally zen and the art of archery kind of style. I have no problem with that. It's the result that counts. That's just my process. But in my process, I use a tech camera. I use an Arca Swiss tech camera, which is a very, very slow camera and very purpose oriented. So you got to do things to make the shot come out. Otherwise, it doesn't come out. It has auto nothing. So you got to do everything manually. And so for me, that's also important in the way that I construct my images. I hope it made some sense to you.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. I guess, with the equipment that's available today, do you see, and I've seen this in a number of photographers that I've spoken to in their work as well, do you see putting constraints like that totally manual process, that particular camera, as not so much putting obstacles in the way, but in helping you hone the craft and focus, I guess, more on things like the composition and so forth, because you've got to photograph in a certain way. So therefore, this tool that I've got, if I use it in the right way, I know the expected result that I'm going to get out of the other end, if that makes sense.
It definitely works for me. Yes, I'm not saying it should be a universal truth,
no,
but it does work for me.
I've seen some fantastic iPhone and Android photographers.
Oh yes, no, obviously, indeed. For me, the result is all that matters. But personally, yes, I do find that kind of process helpful, and I always photograph on a tripod. That also helps slowing down. And also, since the process is so slow, on the other hand, it sort of like inspires me or stimulates me or forces me, as you said, in a way, to explore the location first, like walk in the location and look around. Because at the moment I take out my tripod and I start doing things, if that doesn't work, then it would take me a long time to reset somewhere else. I better
make your mind up before you go.
So it helps me. Yes, indeed.
I guess talk to me about that. I mean, you've talked about going into the field with a concept. How do you feel when you get there and say the lighting conditions aren't playing the way that you'd like them to? Let's say it's you're looking for some side light on a mountain or a cliff or a hillside or something, and the clouds just come in and it's totally grey. Do you just pack up and go home, or do you shoot through that difficulty, or what? How do you deal with that adversity, I guess, of not getting the shot that you envisaged with the concept originally?
That happens too many times to pack up and go home.
That's photography.
Exactly. So I never pack up and go home. And I think it's actually stimulating and inspiring as well. This is why probably I don't develop one concept only at any given time, because I want to keep my mind free to sort of like go with the flow with the weather that we find. And as you know, that's totally unpredictable. And but I do believe that there is always something to photograph. It's just that we are not able to see it. So that's my approach. Especially when, as you said, if we go in the field with a preconceived vision or image or concept in our mind, and then we risk to sort of like, okay, that didn't work out, forget about it. But I think it's very inspiring to just sort of go in the field without expectation, so to speak. So that's what I'm trying to do, and then react to whatever light conditions or tide or wind or whatever I find. And so I always try and photograph, even if I then trash everything. I always photograph when I go out, because I think it's good gymnastic for the eye and the brain, and actually the muscle memory and the technique and everything else.
Yeah. Okay. So, what about the process itself? You've got to the field, as you said, you might walk around. How long would you? Oh, well, actually, let's start before that. How long? Let's say you've decided you want to go somewhere. How long would you spend thinking about that and planning that trip before you actually go? And then we can talk about what happens in the field a little bit more.
All right. So the planning part of the trip is done mostly by my wife. Funny enough, she's
Okay.
my editor and my location manager, so to speak. So I tell her, okay, how about going to, let's say, Australia, and I've
Sure.
seen photos out of the South Coast and that inspires me. So she goes and looks at photographs at Google Maps and something like that. And she does a lot of research. And then she calls me and we sit through all that she found. And so I'll think about mostly on Google Maps with the satellite view. If I see like rock formation and things that look sort of like potential, they have potential. We established a sort of frame for our trip, and then we go there. And I normally, if I can spare the time, I kind of allow twice or three times as much the time that is potentially needed. So, right. So if in one location, I allow maybe 2 days for that because you never know the weather, or 3 days if I can spare.
Yep.
And then and we do that, and we do that at times. We do sessions like that, and we prepare trips that we are going to do at some point. So we have a lot of trips that are in various stages of planning, and so that's the first part. I never look at photos of places right before the trip because I don't want to get influenced by what I see.
Okay.
I do look maybe like a year ahead when we decide, is it worth going somewhere?
Yeah, right.
And but then I never look at photos of other people's photos because I don't want to get influenced by things. And when we arrive to places, I walk. Normally, we explore in daytime when the light is not great, and so I can understand the location. I can understand what I want to do with the location. I can understand if it's on the sea. I can understand what kind of tide do I need. Where is the sun? Because on TPE you can see where the sun rises and sets. But the real world is never the same thing because you have a rock in the way, you have a cliff in the way, you have whatever in the way.
That's exactly it.
So you gotta do some recognition and decide some recon, and then decide what to do. And then we come back. And even in the recon, I take photos. And if the sky is cloudy, I love clouds. As you probably noticed in my work, I love to use the clouds. So if there's clouds, I do that. And then I come back as many times as it takes. And I'm noticing that through the years that very seldom my best work is on the first visit. Yeah. I need my best work is normally when I come back. It might be the next day. It doesn't have to be 5 years later, But
sure.
But the first time I might be overwhelmed and might be overlooking things. So that's why I do a first visit.
Okay. How would you describe, I guess, your process in the field? What are the things that you're looking for that make up the compositions that you'd be happy to shoot?
First of all, for me, composition is the first and most important thing in an image. Most people perhaps would say the light, but for me, especially today with Photoshop, you can recreate whatever light you want, but you cannot recreate the composition if it's not done correctly in the field. So for me, composition is the first and most important pillar above which a good image stands. So, and for me, composition is a matter of lines and masses. Masses being physical masses, like a boulder or a cliff or a sea stack or whatever you have, the mountain, but also masses of colors and textures. So if you do have like the sea, I can foresee, for instance, in this wave, let's say, and I can imagine, okay, if I do 3 seconds, these waves will turn into stripes. But if I do 3 minutes, this wave will turn into a flat expanse of something, of texture. So I try to organize the elements that are either physically present in the landscape or that I can transform in the landscape. Like if you have moving clouds, you can transform them into lines, and those lines would go from here to there, and so I try to think in those terms. So lines and masses. And you mentioned the foreground and the background. I do love a good relationship between foreground and background if I can make it happen, but I don't force it if it's not there, so to speak. So it's sort of like it depends on the locations. Yeah. And I'm not really fond of the rules. I know all the rules that there are, the rule of thirds, the spiral, the Fibonacci, the rules of whatever, right? But they're there
to be broken, of course.
I love the rules because I can forget about the rules. So, if the rule of thirds works, it works. But in some situations, it just doesn't work, and you cannot force things
there's certain skies where putting a third of the frame in the sky is just pointless,
Exactly, and so I consider them guidelines that exist in the back of my mind, and I forgot about them when I'm working, and hopefully they will guide me subconsciously or something, But yes, I'm not too fond on that,
Sure. So once you've got the images, you've packed up and come home, are you straight into your processing, or do you leave it for a while and leave it to think about it and forget about it? Or, is it just a quick review and pick, that one will work and move on?
Now, that's also interesting that you ask, is I never process my images right after I took them.
Yep.
I have images from 2018 that are waiting to be processed. I just checked the other day, and the older folder that I need to look into is from 2018. So I always process them after some time. It kind of started by accident because I am on the road in 2 chunks, but for about 6 months a year. So normally I leave in mid-September and I come back home in mid-December.
Mm-hmm.
So right there, the images and I'm on the road both for my personal work and for workshops. So I do not have the time to actually sit down and process images with the care that they would require. So I cannot do it. Maybe it's just me that I'm not able to do it. And so right there, when I come home, images are already 2 or 3 months old. And then I'm home for Christmas, maybe around New Year's, and then I leave for 3 more months. So I do processing in the summer. And so best case, I'm processing images that are between 1 month old or 6 months old, right there. But I noticed that doing that, it's sort of extremely helpful to me to remove not the emotional thing, because I remember everything I have too good a memory. I never forget anything. So I remember everything that I shot and how I did it and so on. But it removes sort of like for instance, you climb the mountain for 3 hours to get to some spot. And then you think, oh, this image must be great because I put a lot of effort into it, and then you go back home and it's just meh. It's
it was all right.
And you're like, oh shit!
Got lots of them.
I shouldn't have done that. I walked 3 hours for nothing with 20 kilos on my back. So it kind of removes that, Or if I photograph like in the ocean, like with waders and so on, and those photos are very adventurous, must be a great image, you know. And then maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So removing the time, remove that sort of like connection that you have with the process that you did, and you sort of like, for me at least, it allows me to look at the image a little more objectively, a little less sort of like you know, I'm not in love anymore. It's sort of like it's not like that the lightning striking. It's sort of like, if it still survives, if an image, I still consider it a good image after 6 months or a year, then it might be a good image for real.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah,
I definitely get it. So what about your workflow? Are you spending, you know, hours honing the image, you know, sharpening, contrast, you know, doing your dodging and burning and all the rest of it, or are you a less is more sort of editor?
I think that would depend on the image, probably. Normally, I try to get as much in camera as I can. Number one, because I'm old.
Yep.
I started with film in the 70s, you know, so I'm used to the fact that photography is made in camera more than in the computer. It's just the way I came up with photography, you know.
Oh.
So, and also I like the process. I like to do long exposures and single shots. Ideologically, I like to do single shots more than sort of like single shots with grad filters more than HDR. You know, it's closer to my way of expressing myself. You know, and again, nothing against people that does that and they do composites and they do whatever they do. It's the final image that counts, but the way to get there for me is important. So since I'm doing that, then I have less to do in computer, in post-processing, which is also instrumental for me because I don't have a lot of time to spend to do that, doing that. So like recently I got a black and white digital back because I like to just see things in black and white, because you know, most of my fine art work is in black and white. So I think it makes more sense to me to just work in black and white. Is one less step that I have to do in post-processing, you know. So but that said, there are images that require more attention in post-processing, so to speak, and images that are depending on the conditions and whatever happened in the field and so on, there are images that need a little less of that. So, but I'm not a person that spends a lot of time doing post-processing. So in your alternative that you offer me, I think I'm more of a less is more kind of guy, if possible.
Sure.
And if I can add a little thing, you know, when I was a musician, you know, classical musicians need to practice a lot every day just to stay in shape.
Yeah.
And my goal was always to do that as economically as I could, because I like to play. I didn't like to play scales. You know, I like to play music.
Yeah. No one likes to practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
I learned guitar at a young age and hated the practice and just the scales and the picking and just.
Yeah, so you know what I mean, right? Nobody likes to do that. So I spent a lot of years to develop a way that it was as effective and as efficient as possible to do that in the shortest possible amount of time. And I guess when I moved to professional photography, I thought, well, I need to do the same, because, you know, I like to shoot, I like to travel, I like to shoot, but I don't really like to spend 1 hour on one mask in Photoshop. If I can do the same, if I can get to the same effect in 5 minutes, I'm much happier, you know. So I think that's, and also, yeah, I don't know if you do workshops, but people that come to my workshops, they don't have a lot of time. They are not doing this full time. So they have a job, they have a family, and
that's right.
they inevitably they ask me, what about post-processing? And they have this face like, I'm going to torture them. I know they're going to die. And like so, so I try to teach them the fastest way to bring a photo from 0 to like 80% of the potential of the image in about 5 minutes. Yep. So they can get to see something, and then for the image that they want to spend more, I can also go into advanced stuff for them if they want. But it's so intimidating for them that I found that I needed to find a way to sort of like streamline the post-processing as much as I could so that they could enjoy the process rather than loathe the process. And in doing that, it helped me tremendously to make my own workflow more efficient and efficacious as well, because efficiency is great, but if you're very efficient in doing something bad, you're just doing bad stuff faster.
That's right. Bad stuff efficiently.
Exactly.
You get to a bad result very quickly.
Exactly. So you need to be efficient, but also efficacious, if that's a word. You need efficacy and efficiency at the same time. So I think, the less time I can spend on the computer, the happier I am.
Yeah. How do you feel when you're out shooting?
When I'm in the zone, I feel just fantastic. It's just a high, is you feel connected to nature, you feel connected with yourself. You are in a sort of like a Zen. For me, at least, you're in a Zen mode. And that's where, back to the previous question of yours, is where having a camera that does nothing for you helps, because you sort of get into that zone and into that process. And for me, it's all about telling the things that I'm not so great at telling with words about myself and my soul and so on. So I get in touch with myself and in nature, and I sort of like forget everything that happens around me. And eventually my wife sort of like wakes me up from that and says, hey, we need to go, or something.
Come on, Vieri, time to go for a coffee.
I'm hungry, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I can stay there forever. That's at least the feeling that I have, So it's a beautiful way to save money on a psychiatrist.
I'm definitely with you there. It's my favorite way of relaxing too, and
exactly.
If you can make a career out of relaxing, then that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I guess I should have become either a yoga teacher, but it requires too much patience. I don't know if I can do that. Or a photographer, maybe.
You've got a very defined style. How did you develop that, and how do you see it developing? And some people have their routine and that's what they do, and they're happy with that style and they don't see any need to extend it or develop it. Is your style still developing, and if so, how?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. That's very appreciated. And I definitely think it is, because I think that when we stop developing and growing is the moment we start actually dying. Creatively and artistically. So, and the way I develop my style, and what I believe is the way that we all develop our own style, in my view, is like this: is by doing. So you go to the field, into the field, and you shoot, and then you go home and look at the photos, and you decide which photos you like and you don't. And then the next time you go into the field, you would have built the beginning of a sort of like database in your mind that allows you to sort of like discard solution that you already know won't work for any given compositional problem or light problem that you face in the field. And slowly, you're going to sort of like develop what is eventually becoming your style. But to me, it all starts basically with problem solving. I understand this sounds mundane, but I approach composition as a sort of artistic problem solving, between quotes, if you will. So it's sort of like, okay, how do I make these elements work? And then you try and you change optics and you change your vantage point, and you change your exposure and you change your filters, you change whatever, and then you go home and you examine the results. And then the next time that you face a similar problem, you already know that focal length won't work, or that approach won't work, right? And for post-processing, so that way in the field, you sort of develop your shooting style, and then in the same way in post-processing, you're sort of developing your post-processing style, or your visual style, if you want. So by doing that, by post-processing images, and then you look at them, and then you don't like things, and then you change things, and then you look at them again after 6 years, or 6 months, or 6 days, and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? Or oh, that's too bland, or maybe I went too far. And I do that also while processing. My post-processing is done in steps and horizontally. So I process like 10 images, the first step, then I walk away. And then I do a second step on all the images, and then I walk away. Okay. And when I come back, I notice, oh man, I went too far with this. This is too contrasty. Or maybe, oh man, this one is too bland. It's not really powerful. And it helps me doing it like that. It helps me to move away and go back. It allows me to keep some distance and put some distance. And doing it horizontally, it allows me to develop a style, actually. Because if I did one image vertically from 0 to finished, and then another one, they would end up being different. But if I do them in batches, I have a better chance to develop a style and a coherence for a portfolio or for any given body of work, you know? So that's the way I do it, and it works nicely for me. But again, any approach, as soon as the result is good, any approach is fine by me.
Fair enough. How much of your success would you attribute to your ability to communicate well?
Do I have the ability to communicate is the question I'm asking myself.
Communicating fine at the moment.
I think communication is fundamental. And back to the music metaphor, I always used to say, because when you play, it's sort of like a performing thing. So you got to go on stage and play. And stage fright is a very real thing, So I used to tell my students, well, if you play fantastically well in your bathroom, the world will know about it, So unless that's what you want to do, if you want to be an amateur that plays for himself, fantastic. But if you want to play, then at some point, you got to have to face that. And what we do now with photography is basically the same thing. You can take the most amazing, beautiful, and history-making photographs, but if they stay in your hard drive, it's just for yourself. Nobody ever sees them. And that's fantastically fine if that's what you want to do. But for me as a professional, that would be the end of me. So I need to get my work out there. So communication, marketing, and all that, it's probably 80% of the success, I would say. And if we consider that having a good body of work, or a strong body of work, or a great body of work should be a given if you want to do this job, then communication becomes the 100% of putting it out there, paradoxically, if you will, but it's really important. And obviously, there are a lot of people that are much better at communicating than they are at doing what they do, and are much more successful than other people that are great photographers, but they're not so great at communicating. So I think honing our communication skills, exactly, honing our communication skills, I think, is just really important. And I don't agree with people that say, no, forget about it. The work speaks for itself. the work should speak for itself, and that's granted. But you also should put some people to listen to it speaking, because if the work speaks in an empty room, the work is great, but again,
that's
nobody
right.
sees
It's interesting you say that, and the music analogies something similar to a conversation I was having with another photographer. He does mostly street stuff, but he's also a musician, was in a band for some time, and then sort of packed that away and concentrated on photography. But he was sort of asking the question, should he, push through his inhibitions about that side of his personality and that side of his artistry, I guess, and get back into showing a little bit more of his work in the music field. And my advice to him was absolutely.
I kind of lost you there, Grant, for a second.
Sorry, you got me.
I kind of lost you at some point. You went silent for a sec.
Okay, sorry about that.
No.
Yeah, so what I was saying is he's asking whether or not he should push through his inhibitions about some of his being embarrassed that he's not good enough or whatever, those feelings that you get about your work, whether it's photography or music or what. And my advice to him was absolutely, you've got to push through the inhibitions, put your work out there, and some people will like it, not everyone will, but if you don't put it out there, as you said, you're playing in the bathroom, no one sees it, no one's going to know about it. So if you want people to know about it, you've basically got to get it out there and get people aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. I think that the problem for us as artists is that our work is basically ourselves. So we put ourselves on the line. And if you perform, even more so, because you are physically on stage with guys in front of you listening to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's both at the same time basically a way of bearing your soul in front of other people. And nobody wants to do that because,
everybody has that fear that, people will laugh at you, not find you good enough, criticize you, or whatever,
So that's one aspect. But the other aspect for me is that we need to be able to, I don't want to say detach from our work, but sort of like consider our work as a snapshot of us at a given moment in time. So Absolutely. That doesn't define me, it's just defining something that I did at some point in time.
Yeah.
Right. So if I can manage my psychology to accept that, then I can put my work out there, and then I can use it to grow. Because I go out, I play, or I put my photos out, and if people criticize them, it doesn't inflicts me pain. It doesn't create discomfort or pain on my self-worth or the image that I have on myself, but it can help me grow, fine-tune, and focus my vision better, and so on and so forth.
Every piece of criticism should be an opportunity for you to improve. Now,
exactly.
Okay, when I say that, I don't mean somebody just throwing rocks at you because they don't like you as a person or whatever, and they say bad things about your work. What I'm saying is, if somebody's giving you some feedback about your work, and the more constructive that feedback is, the better. But if somebody's giving that, then that's an opportunity. That's a gift. That's an opportunity for you to take that on board and say, okay, well, if I do change some of these things, if I crop that a bit tighter, or crop it a bit wider, or change the contrast, or whatever it is, or move my position and go back to the spot and reshoot by moving my vantage point slightly to the left or right or higher or lower or whatever, they're the things that can help you hone and improve your craft.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one more thing, possibly, is a beneficial thing coming from criticism is that when people ask you or tell you, okay, how about this crop? Why don't you do that? You know, and it helps me thinking about why I did the things that I did the way I did. And if I have to explain it to you, it's either strengthen my vision, sort of like, and allows me to sort of like verbalize and yeah, sort of like express that in words, or it helps me questioning it and says, oh, right, yes, that doesn't make any sense or didn't make any sense. I don't know why I did it, you know?
Yep.
So being open to other people's opinion is absolutely fundamental. And as hard as it is to put ourselves out there, because basically when we do that, we drop the armor and the self-defenses that we spent a lifetime to build. You know? And
that's exactly
we just,
yeah.
you know, but I think it's for the best.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about places now. You know, where you live. Does that influence how you shoot or what you shoot, or are you more about getting out into the wider world than your local area?
I think I'm curious, basically. So I think it's curiosity that drives me. So that makes the location, actually position on the globe, less important for me. So if I see something that is interesting to me and then stimulates my curiosity and it's just around the corner, I go shoot that. But if I see like the Wanaka tree in New Zealand and I want to go there, then I have to go to New Zealand.
There's only one of them, so you got to go there. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So I think it's curiosity that drives me, and I enjoy being on the road. So I've no problem in living out of a bag for 6 months, 4 months, whatever. So I'm fine with that. So I like the whole process. But to me, I think it's I think you can find great photography and great images everywhere, pretty much. There are iconic locations around the world that are iconic for a reason. But interesting, because I put out a tweet yesterday about this. I think that to me, the real creative challenge is, or a bigger creative challenge is in going somewhere that everybody else went and make a unique image. Mm-hmm. If I go to a place where I'm the first going, it's going to be unique by definition, because it's me that took, it's the only photo that exists. But if I can make a unique image of the Wanaka tree that has been photographed 1 million times, then for me, it's a much better, much more rewarding, artistically speaking or creatively speaking, is a much more rewarding achievement. So when I go to places that are like iconic or famous, I enjoy doing that, and I'm trying to look at them with the eye of a child. You know, it's sort of like I've never seen them before, and try to give them my interpretation. And if you take this and copy paste it into the field next door, then you sort of like train yourself to make images out of nothing, even when other people wouldn't even bother to take the camera out. My wife, that is fundamental for me on many levels, obviously, but also in the business, because she's my editor and she's my partner in crime. She tells me that probably, according to her, one of my best quality is to be able to make images out of nothing. And the first time she said that to me, it was sort of like in a funny spirit. You know, we kind of laugh about that. But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, if that's true, then it's great, because it allows me to really be able to make my vision come across regardless of where I am, and that would be my purpose, ultimately. So So yeah, I think it's the curiosity and the challenge of being able to create images out of whatever that moves me. So the physical location on the globe is a little less important.
Okay. So given that you've shot all over the world now, what locations are still on your bucket list?
There's so many. I'm not going to live long enough, I'm afraid.
No one ever will, I think.
I would seriously, I've been using Australia and New Zealand as an example during this conversation, but
Sure.
that's on the bucket list, and that's where we're going to go if everything goes well, finger crossed, in 2023, probably in the second half of the year. And I've been wanting to come to you guys for a long time. I've been to Sydney when I was a musician, but I not to do photography, so
Sure.
I wasn't that much into that. I played at the Australian Flute Convention, of all things.
Oh, wow.
And they invited me to play in there, and I drove around a little bit, and I loved what I saw. And so I've been wanting to come back ever since. So we're going to spend some time there. So definitely Australia, New Zealand, Easter Island are on my bucket list. I want to go to the Oregon coast. I've never been there. I want to go to Finland and Norway, and not just Lofoten, which of course is some place that everybody wants to go to, but I want to, if I'm lucky, I want to spend like a month or two exploring the fjords and everything up there. It should be beautiful.
Yeah.
And Patagonia, I've never been, and Patagonia is fun, but I'm a little less interested in going there personally. Okay. I understand the beauty and the majestic nature of those landscapes, but and I hope I'll be able to make it sometime, but not as pressing for me.
That's
for the kind
lower
of work
down
that I'm doing now. A little lower down on the list. And I'm lucky to live in Italy, which is beautiful and close to a lot of European destinations, which is fantastic. And how about you? If I might ask you a question.
Yeah, sure. I did Easter Island a few years ago, actually. We did a trip to Peru, and then did a side trip on the way home. Well, kind of on the way home. Had to go back via Chile, so it wasn't really on the way home. Is fly halfway across the Pacific to fly back to Chile and then all the way across the Pacific. But I mean, that was amazing. That was a real bucket list. Peru was a real bucket list one. What's still on the list? Funnily enough, I'd love to do Iceland. I've never been to Iceland, so that's up there. I'd love to go back to Japan. I spent a bit of time around there, which was great. And I'd love to go back to Canada because I saw a little bit there around Banff and areas around Alberta and whatever. But there's so, I mean, as you said, so many places. Love to go to Patagonia. Love to do Antarctica.
Oh yeah.
There's a little island that's really hard to get to, but it's about halfway between the southern tip of New Zealand and Antarctica, called Macquarie Island. That's absolutely. It's kind of a. I mean, it's tiny, but it's kind of a nature reserve. So getting permission to get in there and getting there is challenging. And you can really only go there in the summer months because you get there in winter and it's blizzards and very, very strong winds for most of the year. But you have things like elephant seals, penguin colonies, albatross colonies, and those sorts of things. It's just an amazing wildlife refuge, I guess, that's really small, really compact. But I can see real potential for if you can get there. As I say, it's not somewhere that you can just jump on a flight to. You've got to apply to go there, and usually you've got to have some kind of scientific contribution that you're bringing. So it'd be much easier for someone from National Geographic or something like that to get in there than just any old landscape photographer.
Yes, indeed. We are not really considered as big contributors to science or anything like that.
Not a lot.
They mistreat us, isn't it? A little bit sort of like, oh yeah, these guys, they do like beautiful things and that's it, But I think that landscape photography is much more than that, actually. It's,
I totally agree.
It's of course, yeah, it is beautiful, of course, yeah, but also animal photography or nature photography is also beautiful. So why that has a contribution to science and ours doesn't,
Yeah. But I think it can, because you can make people aware of the landscape that is there, and
absolutely.
whilst trying to make it look as beautiful as possible, you also raise the awareness that some of these places are very fragile, and that if we're not careful, and it's one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit later, but if we're not careful, we'll lose them. And once they're gone, those photos will have much more value, because they're the only thing that actually proves they existed in the first place.
Exactly. And also I think that if you make people aware of how beautiful nature and the landscape is, they would be less inclined to throw plastic bottles around when they go for a hike or something.
Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah, I would. Yeah.
So we've talked about places you'd like to go. Where have you been that you would want to go back to? Where's somewhere that draws you back, keeps calling you back, that you've been to before, and you just have to keep going there?
I don't want to say everywhere I've been. I mean, in a way, it's like that. But if I had to choose, number one, first of all, I've been really privileged because I've been in so many amazing places, and that's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. And number two, I'm also very privileged because thanks to my workshop, I get to go back to many of those places. And yeah, of course, I'm taking care of the group, but I still go there and see the places, and eventually I can squeeze a photo every once in a while, and then and so that's a real privilege. But high on the list is Iceland. Iceland, I go there maybe twice a year at the very least, and I'm never tired of going back to Iceland. It's just amazing. And it's very close to my soul in terms of what I'm trying to do with my photography. So,
sure.
And I go in winter, and I highly recommend you go in winter if you ever go and have a chance to decide when to go, because the contrast between the black rocks and the volcanic landscape and the white snow and blue ice is just, and if you get some great color in the light in the sky, is just to die for. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Ironically, the next stop for me would be the Southwest USA. So one is frozen glaciers and snow, and the other one is desert and sand and and red rocks, But probably because it's the place when I got the call. So I'm always very happy to go back to Death Valley or the Southwest. And those landscapes for me, they have a deep spiritual quality to them, and a deep spiritual depth to them that I'm never tired to explore. So, and many of those places that we go photograph are actually sacred to the native inhabitants of those places. And you definitely understand why, because you really feel the power of nature. And if there were a temple to the earth, to me, it would be the Southwest USA. These landscapes are just so powerful and so nearly overwhelming that you're just happy to be there and forget about the camera. It's for me, that's so Iceland in a way. And also, I always look at the stories behind things and the legends behind things. And when you go to Iceland and all these places, they have names that reminds or refer back to Nordic legends and so on. And you definitely understand why. These places, they have such power built into them in a way. And I feel that if we are lucky and privileged enough and intelligent enough, artistically speaking, we might be able to get a little bit of that power coming across and can be lucky enough to get a little bit of that power coming across through our work, and for other people to see the emotions and the feelings that we get when we get in front of those places, because those places for me are just, you know, so bigger than us in a way, you know.
Yeah, right.
You really feel how small we are, and how what we can do is sort of like extract as much as we can in terms of feelings and mood and expressions and emotions, and squeeze it in our work and try to make sense of what nature did for us. And we are going to be unsuccessful all the time, and that's why I love to come back as many times as I can, because maybe the next time I'm going to be a little better, and I'm going to be able to, you know, give a little more justice, to render more justice to the places and to what I'm saying, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a never-ending endeavor for me.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm doomed.
What's the most memorable experience you've had in your photography career?
You know, the obvious answer would be the next one, but and also the easy way out of it. I hope the next one. Let's put it this way: I hope the most memorable thing is still around the corner. But I've seen things that you know, signed me and have been definitely seminal for me in my growth, photographically and artistically, and have been fundamental for my growth. And I think I cannot pin it down to one single experience.
Okay.
But I think probably the first time I went to Iceland was sort of like that kind of experience. The first time that I went to the Southwest, and it was summer, and it was incredibly hot, and some of the landscape and the sky and the things that I saw were really seminal for me. Iceland was seminal for me, definitely. The first time I went to Iceland was unforgettable. And pretty much I try to find something like that every time I go out there. Sure. I try to turn every experience into one of those moments. I don't know if I'm always successful. Sometimes it's obviously less powerful, but I think I've been lucky in that I sort of been able to make it into an enjoyable experience and into a formation experience every time that I go out, even if it's like really bad and the weather is not cooperating at all and anything. I try to learn something, and I think it's the learning that is possibly the most memorable thing for me. So if I can learn whatever any time that I go out, I'm happy.
Fabulous.
I know it's sort of like a not answer you probably were hoping for.
No, it's totally fine. Have you got any horror stories? Everyone has a horror story in their photography career.
Yes. Oh, I have so many of those.
What's the worst thing that's happened?
Well, I have lots of gear horror story. Like it was when 2021 in winter, in November, December, and 21, and I was out there with my Phase 1 camera. And an accident happened, and the tripod toppled, and the digital back went down on the snow, on the frozen snow, and it kind of cracked. The screen cracked, and the electronic connection stopped working, so I couldn't use it. And the money that I put into that camera, that was probably the gear-wise. Probably the most horrible moment. And I understand it's money related more than anything else, but that was terrible. And then we got stranded many times. We got caught by storms. We got caught by waves. All sorts of this kind of things. But I got to say that all these experiences during the years were very, very good for me on a more personal level, because again, my wife would remember the first time, for instance, we went to Normandy in 2011. I wasn't then at home. If the weather was not cooperating, I would get frustrated, and I would get sort of like, because I had very little time to build my portfolio. So yeah, I had like whatever holiday I could spare, you know, so to go there and not getting the image, that was like, oh, you know, and getting frustrated. But as time went by, all the horror stories actually turned me into a much better person, and in terms of resilience to frustration, to bad experiences, to not being able to get the shot. And now I am okay, you know, we go there, I don't get the shot. And she's like, but you didn't get the shot. I'm like, no problem. I'm okay. Let's go eat, you know. It's going to be a better day tomorrow, you know. Whatever.
That's it.
The horror story.
Go on.
Yeah, no. I was saying the horror story in old age probably turned me into a much better zen and more relaxed person, you know.
Yeah, I think that attitude though is you know, it comes with experience, but it's something that, you know, a lot of photographers need to develop in their, you know, over their careers, is that ability to just let it go and say, oh, didn't get it this time, we'll get it next time.
Yeah, ultimately there is nothing you can do anyway. So.
Most of the time, well, yeah, except when you know you've screwed it up by, you know, leaving your filters at home, or leaving. I left a tripod head at home. I drove for about 3 hours to a shoot. You know, then went on another hour and a bit hike. Got to the point where I'm unpacking my bag and there's no tripod head.
Oh no.
Great.
Well, I had one of those in that valley, driving to the racetrack with a group, you know, with my group during the workshop, and we drove there and we remove all the bags from the Jeep, and because we used a special Jeep for that, and we remove everything from the Jeep, and I kind of find out that I forgot my own tripod. So I loaded everybody else's tripods on the Jeep, but I forgot my own tripod. So I don't have a tripod, and I'm like, okay, so we drove like 3 hours, and the last hour and a half of which on a sort of like a 4x4 series 4x4 road. Yeah. So it's not like I can go back and grab the tripod, you know. But I said, okay, whatever. And one of the guys was very, very kind. Said, if you need for a shot or two, I'll be happy to lend you mine. But nice. I didn't want to do that because, you know, he came to the workshop, and so he is the one that should get.
That's
the shot,
right. He's the customer.
Me, you know? Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, no, don't worry. And I learned how to use my bag as a makeup, make do tripod, and obviously I had to shoot very low on the ground. So I tried to get images that way too. So it taught me something, you know. And I thought, okay, there are images that you can grab at insect height on the playa that I never actually thought about, because I'm always a little higher than that with my tripod, even if I go down, you know. Sure. So after that, I thought, okay, that's good. And the same thing happened once in Iceland again. A little tripod accident. That time was a Gitza tripod that self-destructed. Basically, it snapped. The metal part snapped and broke. I think it was cold thing or something like that.
Yeah.
And so the only thing I had was my wife's tripod, which was a sort of like this very, very small and light travel tripod. The small section of which is like in Italy, I would say a spaghetti thing kind of thing. So in winter in Iceland, you couldn't really open that thing, you know. So I could use it, but with no leg extended, because if I extended even one leg, it would start wobbling.
Yeah.
So, you know, you learn through all these little accidents that we have, and you also learn to hone. Seriously speaking, you learn to hone your workflow. Sort of like, okay, I'm going out there. Do I have the tripod? Do I have the head? Do I have the camera? Do I have the filters? Do I have? And you sort of like build, seriously speaking. Now, for me, it ended up in me building a mental checklist of things that I go through. And I go through those when I leave home for a trip. And I go through another checklist when I leave the hotel for a shoot. And another checklist when I open the camera bank. And another checklist when I start fiddling with my old manual camera, and go through all these checklists. And I have a checklist in my mind for post-processing. So my process is all basically boringly based on a set of checklists that I go through.
But to be honest, those systems I think are really important, whether they're mental or you've got it on a notepad or whatever. That checklist and ability to go, yes, I've got everything that I need. I'm where I want. I'm going through the post processing, etc. That sort of things. Those systems that you put into it, I think, are really important. As you said, it's about making things more efficient too, so that you're not scrambling around looking for, I mean, when I've got a filter bag with multiple pockets, that filter always goes in that pocket. So I know even in the dark, which pocket I'm reaching into, and I'm pulling out the right filter. I don't have to sit there and work out and turn lights on and work out, have I got my ND8 or my ND1000, because they're very different.
Absolutely. And my bag is extremely tidy, and I'm aware that I might look a bit tedious in my way of packing things and so on, but that saves me a huge amount of time and grief in the field,
because you can look at a glance and know that something's missing or not in the right place, and if you put it in a way that makes sense, then it makes it much easier to work with. I'm totally with
you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think there is a point in being well organized if you do the job we do.
Definitely
makes things easier.
Beyond that, what's the practice of photography taught you about the world?
I can answer like this. I'm always being, in my childhood and when I was a kid and growing up, I wasn't very out. I've always been very silent and observing. And I think that the practice of photography was both a result of that and a way of developing that. So I would say that probably the most important thing that photography taught me is to really look at things, which is not just when it ended up not just being a thing that I do when I photograph, but it's sort of like became my way of going about life. So I look at people, I see things, I try to see people, not just look at them. I try to see things, not just look at them. And I try to pay attention. So photography for me means paying attention to things that other people would just overlook or not be aware of. So I don't want to say that photography helped me raise my awareness about the world, because I'm not a guru or a philosopher or anything, but in my small, for whatever little I could or can do about making the world a better place, and making myself a better place, I think photography helped me do both. Definitely helped me make myself a better person, and hopefully and possibly helped me be more aware of the world and living my life in a fuller and more aware, productive, positive way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense, and very, very worthwhile as far as I'm concerned. Have you ever hit a creative wall, and if so, how did you handle it?
Sometimes I hit creative, very small creative walls,
Speed bumps,
so to speak. Bumps in the road, but painful bumps in the road. Let's say.
Sure.
More than I never had like a writer's block kind of thing, so I never hit one of those. I hit creative walls in my post-processing more than in the field. Like this, I face images that I took and I envisioned in a way, and then when I go to the post-processing of them, I sort of cannot make it the way that I remember, the way that I have in my mind. And so creatively, it's not that I don't know what to do, but I don't know how to get there. So I think it's a creative and technical world at the same time. So I end up writing them off as, okay, I don't know enough about post-processing. I need to know and learn different routines that helps me get there, or maybe there aren't tools at the moment that helps me get there. So maybe I need to wait for the next version of Photoshop or whatever. And some of these images, I revisit along the years, over the years, and I come to a point where I'm suddenly able to make sense of them. So it's sort of like maybe more of a technical creative world than an actual creative world, but it's the frustrating, the small frustrations that I still have with my workflow are those, I think, because when I go in the field, if I'm always inspired to go out there, and if I go out there and I don't find things that makes me happy photographically, I'm now in that Zen place that we were talking about before. So I don't consider that a creative world. I consider that life. It didn't happen today. It's going to happen tomorrow.
Yep.
But I still get a little frustrated sometimes in post-processing. I need to improve my Zen level.
I know the feeling. I was working on an image today, actually, and it just wasn't working for me. So I gave up and worked on something different.
Exactly. Just forget about it.
Yeah. I might come back to it. It depends. But I was looking at it and I was actually starting to hate it. And that's a sign when you've got to stop.
Yeah, exactly. I normally just sort of like close it and trash it, but keep the raw. So if I want to revisit it eventually I just start again from zero and
I've done that many
times. Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
Definitely abundance. Too many people doing this. Too many images. Abundance of people. Abundance of images, abundance of Instagrams and stuff like that, and that comes with diminishing awareness in people looking at the images. Because I remember you bought a photo book and you flip through the pages and write the text and take your time on an image. But now I scroll through Instagram and I look at a billion images, but how many do I see? Sometimes I scroll and I stop and I look, but for so many people, I don't know, I read somewhere that the average time that people dedicate to one image is like a second or something. Or
I've seen it as 0.6 seconds.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So how do you work with that? So for me, that's the real problem. The real problem is that it's up to us as photographers and artists. We need to, I don't want to say educate because it sounds patronizing and pompous, but we need to sort of inspire more than educate people to stop and look at our work and read our words and dedicate time to our craft. Because that's the only way, to me, that photography, like intentional photography, can survive. Snaps, iPhone snaps that you share on Facebook for your family and friends, no worries, no problem against that. But the problem is, if you go on social media and on forums and whatever, there is a lot of noise. So serious photography or more intentional photography, or photography that I would like to spend some time on, looking at an image and analyzing and thinking about it, gets sort of buried into that noise. We need to develop a way to filter through the noise, and I can do that for my own, but for myself. But for other people, we need probably to develop new ways of putting our work out there. NFT is definitely a huge potential in that. And our own website is great, but then we are back to the previous question about how do you communicate that, and how you get that across. Because I'm very acceptable. I don't think that my work is necessarily better than the family snapshot that somebody shares on Instagram. For that person, his family snap is definitely way more important than one of my black and white, moody, long exposures that I put on my feed. Yeah. So importance, it's in the eye of the beholder. So I don't assume to be the one deciding what is important and what's not. But I definitely know that these are two different products for two different audiences, or maybe the audience overlaps somewhere, definitely possible. But if we put our work out there on the same channel that the other work is out there, they will both lose. Because the guy that is interested in lifestyle experience and in family snapshot is going to have to get rid of my stuff from his own feed, and me, I have to get rid of his own stuff. So I don't think we are there yet, where the boom of Instagram probably, and now the direction that Instagram is taking on video and so on is great, because it forces us to find a different channel for our work. Absolutely. And so we probably, we need to find a way to communicate that. But I would say that maybe more than too many people is maybe not enough clarity in the way the work is put out there and the photography is treated and photography is approached and so on and so forth. So it's a very complex question, and I think my answer didn't really go to the bottom of it. but
to be honest, I don't know that anybody will ever get to the bottom of it.
No, I think it's a very complex question, but it's the question in a way.
I've only got a few more questions for you. One is, what would you be if you weren't a photographer?
I would be teaching something, probably, because the next best thing that I love to do is teaching.
Fantastic.
So I'm fortunate that I can do the teaching and the photography together, but probably would be teaching something,
Wonderful, wonderful. Are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to on the podcast?
Definitely. There are so many. Lately I've been spending a lot of time in the NFT space, so I'm going to give you a couple of names out of that, if that's okay. One is Marco Bottigelli.
Okay, I think I've seen some of his work.
I think he's a great travel and landscape photographer, and he's actually a person that I consider him a friend. So I'm privileged enough to consider him a friend, and I love to talk to him about all sorts of stuff. And I think you're going to have a very, very interesting conversation with him as well.
Fantastic.
Both the work and the behind the work. And I don't know, it's I love people that do the kind of photography that I do. So I could give you a lot of names for that, but maybe it's going to be a little more boring for you. So that's why I choose Marco, because it has a little different. It came to mind because it does a little different kind of photography. I think Fabio Antendo is probably a person that it would be very interesting to talk with.
Yep.
Because I really love what he does and what he did with the way he did the processes, photography, and since it's something very different than what I do, I would be very interested in listening to the podcast. So I love for you to talk to him, because I can listen then,
Sure.
And I also like guys that work in the north. So maybe Christian Holberg would be another person that I would love for you to talk to. I don't know, but so many, and I actually feel bad in giving names because I'm forgetting and not giving so many other names.
That's fine. I only need a couple because my list is very long anyway. So. But I always like to add to it because I'm interested in what other people, what photographers other people are aware of and are looking at, and always looking to talk to new and interesting people. I've got one more question for you, and for some of my listeners, it's the most important one. But I know I'm taking a real risk asking an Italian this one. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
No, sorry.
I kind of thought I knew what you were going to say there.
But as again, people who like what they like, so who am I to judge, right?
All right. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with me, Vieri. It's been absolutely fascinating hearing some of your story and getting to know you a little better. Where can people find your work?
People can find my work on my website. I have a website that is called vieribottazzini.com, so that's easy to find because it's my name and surname.com. And I have another one called Wondrous Landscapes, where you can find, it's a more a portfolio-only website.
Sure.
And then I have a third website that is Vieri Bottazzini Workshops, where you can find my workshops. Again, it's vieribottazziniworkshops.com. And also you can find my work on Instagram, obviously. And if people listening to this are into NFT, they can find my work on Foundation and OpenSea and Object as well. So.
Brilliant. All right. Well, I'll include links to where people can find you in the show notes. So once again, thanks very much, Vieri.
No, thank you. It's been a privilege, and it's been a lot of fun too. And it's been great talking to you and getting to know you a little better, even though you asked all the questions. So I'm just happy I could sneakily get one question in, but we should do this in reverse.
Well, I'm happy to do it in reverse. And certainly if you're here in Sydney next year and I'm around, get in touch and we can go and have a coffee and something, and you can grill me.
I'm looking forward to do that. No, definitely, it would be great to actually meet in real life as well. So I hope we'll manage to do that. And thanks again. Thank you very, very much indeed for inviting me. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne and hope to see you out shooting soon.